Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Takeup. Today we have episode 100, Perseverance. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Takeup. Today is a very special episode, at least as far as counting goes. Today is the 100th episode of the Takeup, and as a part of that, we're going to be talking a lot about the show itself and kind of taking a little victory lap. Go back to the playlist, get some stuff that's specific to embroidery, specific to the topic that you like. But if you want to hang out, if you're one of the reciprocators, if you're somebody who's been here watching as we've gone through the last 2 years of live content, then by all means stay tuned. And also there'll be a little bit of a lesson, or at least some things to talk about as far as perseverance, digging into big projects and things of that nature. So as we're here, going to be a lot of interaction today. Going to be talking to everybody who's live quite a bit, and certainly going to share some other things that are going on as far as I got a video thanking me and saying some cool stuff about the show. And we're going to talk about the show itself and some of the things that we've done, and also a list of our top 10 episodes and what those mean to me and some lessons that I took out of those. So some of these lessons that we have will be about the show, but a lot of it will be about business, about creativity, about embroidery, and about how we comport ourselves. And the first thing I'm going to say, funny enough, speaking about perseverance, had some technical difficulties and some other stuff that happened today where I didn't get to go to the lovely and brilliant studios. Usually I would. I didn't get to today. However, part of perseverance is showing up, showing up even when things aren't ideal for you. So here I am from the home office. Hey, maybe a humble place to be, but it's from humble beginnings that all this stuff starts. First thing I'm going to do, though, is say hi to some of the folks who are in and say, first, yeah, Mike is coming in saying 100. Whoa, let's go. Yeah, I am about it. Let's go. And by the way, thank you for naming the Reciprocators. I got to say, that is one of the things I always love. We call the listeners of the Takeup, the watchers of the Takeup, the Reciprocators. Why? Number one, the reciprocator is a very important part of your machine, makes the needle bar go up and down. And when the reciprocator is broken, we don't get stitches. So important thing to have around. Good to have multiple reciprocators around for your machine. Also, number two, it's the idea of reciprocating, that we give back. And that's the thing. We give, we get, and that's the relationship we should have. And all the people here, I have to say thank you very much for being here. If you're not here to watch the show, if you're not here asking questions, if you're not here doing what you do in the decoration field, in the creative field, in the embroidery craft, then I'm not here to talk about it. I'm not here. I don't have my livelihood. I don't have my work. I don't have what I need to do this. And also the interaction I have with you guys is really what keeps me here. My ability to help in whatever way I can is why I'm here. So thank you for being here. Number one, this is about celebrating you guys as much as me, because if you're not on the other side of these screens, then I'm not here teaching you and I'm not here sharing. So thank you. Lyndon says, congratulations on your 100th episode. Thank you, Lyndon. Really appreciate it. Crystal says, happy you make it live on episode 100. Hey, thank you for being here. Cindy out in Texas. Cindy King says, good afternoon. Can't believe it's your 100th show of the Takeup. Congratulations. I think I started with you at the beginning or shortly thereafter. Yeah, truthfully. Thank you. Lots of you folks have been here the whole time. And I know I have interacted with a lot of you personally. Some people I haven't been able to get to, and we've had messages back and forth. Some of you I got to see live at the shows, either at the DAX shows. I got one coming up shortly in Kansas City, if you haven't seen me yet, at the Impressions Expo shows. It was really great to get to see you guys, but this personal connection we get to have through the show and through all the things that we share and teach and explain and all the experiences we share has been really fantastic. Marta says, congratulations on reaching this milestone. Thank you, Marta, and thank you for being here. Joe Rita says, hello from Austin, Texas. Hello, Joe Rita. Thank you for being part of this. And Barb says, hello from North Central Minnesota. Hello. Justa coming in saying hi and congrats from Sweden. Thank you for being a part of the community, Justa. Justin, digitizer himself, Justin says, congratulations on the big 100. Thank you very much. Jeff and Adam, so bjjhats.com, Adam and Jeff Fuller of the Embroidery Nerd and Fuller Embroidery Works say, congrats on 100. Thank you for being here. Christine Shreve, my co-conspirator to some degree, and certainly my co-author on one of my earlier articles that we used to write. We had a themed thing that we did in Stitches magazine called Ask an Expert. If you don't know, we actually did an episode of Ask an Expert. We should always do that again. Christine says, hi, Eric. Congratulations on 100 episodes. You provide a lot of education from the industry. Well done. Thank you very much. Ramona says, woot, 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 100. Way to go. Thank you. Clara is in, and I get to meet her, which is awesome. Hello, happy Friday. Looks like I'm finally at least once in time. Happy 100th. Always enjoy your webinars. They're very informative, educational sessions. Thank you. It's why we do it. Love it. Jesus says, Hello, Eric. Congratulations on the 100th episode. Thank you very much. So Barb says 100. Awesome, Eric. Thank you. Mashid from California says hello. Good to meet you out there as well. Frank from out in the UK, who has been an awesome supporter. Thank you, Frank, for sharing and being so cool about that. Has now an awesome group of his own that he's doing on Facebook. So he helps people out constantly. And that's the kind of people I like to have around here. Just love it. So thank you for being here. Daryl out in California, also Daryl Garcia, congratulations on 100. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, sir. Meaningful interactions with you. And we've had lots of awesome discussions. Can't say enough about that. Thank you for always being the positive force that you are. Janine says, thank you for providing valuable content, being a real down-to-earth educator. I like to think I am. I hope so. And yeah, when she says, how many shows? 100 left for me to catch up. Yeah, 99 others, believe it. And quite a lot more content beyond that with other folks. Dean says, happy 100. And here is to 100 more. Absolutely going to keep it up and keep going. As much as I like this to be a big milestone, I consider just one of the shows on the way through. We have more coming up. And in fact, I'm going to say one other thing. I did have something I wanted to do for 100th that's big and special that I'm not able to do just today. 101. Now, this is kind of appropriate because what I've always had people tell me is my classes, my shows are like going to a college course on a machine embroidery. And I'll say, coming from academia, that makes me feel kind of good and probably not the best way. I like the idea of Professor Eric a little more than I should. But I'll say this, 101 is the episode where you're going to get the fun treat that I had planned for 100 because I couldn't pull it all together in time for this week. But if you hang out for 101, you might have something fun that you liked and something people have been asking me for. So hold on, one more episode. Today we'll do the victory lap. 101, we'll have some fun to give back to you guys. So that's how we're going to go for it. Christine, by the way, speaking co-conspirators, says, oh, I like that. We're definitely co-conspirators, although we haven't been up to much, at least not together lately. Separately, we're keeping ourselves amused. Hey, we have a lot going on. Alan says, congrats on 100. Alan Howell, awesome guy, does lots of education as well. Thank you for being there. Mike, calling it a 2-hour show. I hope not. Honestly, I want this to be a shorter show so we just do our victory lap, say thank you, enjoy ourselves, talk a little bit about perseverance and resistance and how we can get ourselves through big projects and then keep on going from there. But yeah, happy to talk to everybody. Like I said, I like to do the interaction. Not everybody loves this. Some of the YouTube viewers are definitely not in right now. But folks, that's what this particular episode is about. If any episode is getting to talk to you guys who are in the core, who come and watch all the time. By the way, if you are someone who doesn't watch live or can't watch live, I still super appreciate you being here. Don't feel like just because you're not part of the live crew that you're not part of this. If you are watching, if you are listening, if you are doing your best and giving back and making something, if you are sharing that creative impetus you have with the world, I'm here for you. You're part of this. And I thank you for letting me be part of that with you. Whether you're making money on embroidery like I have done, you're a commercial person, you're a craft person, whatever you're doing, if you are here to learn more about your craft, to learn more about yourself, to do better business, to do better creative work, and to get your creativity under control, to talk about these things, then you're here, you're part of this crew, and you're a reciprocator too. And I thank you for being here, even if you can't make it live. I do love talking to everybody, but seriously. Christine says, Professor Eric, he needs to be an avatar. There may be room for more avatars down the road for sure. Cliffhanger, yep, Dean, that's true. Like I said, 101. And Beck says, hey, happy 100. Thank you, Beck. All right. So with that, let's get into some of the actual stuff I had planned for the show today. I thought it'd be fun just to go over some things. As you saw, and I'll bring the banner back up one more time. I'll grab our thumbnail. I threw behind myself a new headshot. The first thing I'm going to say is comparing this headshot to my original headshot. Last 2-3 years have certainly put a little age on me. I think it's put a little age on all of us, but I can see some white hair certainly cropping up where it wasn't before. Got a few more grays in the old beard than I used to. I will say, though, that the fact that I can look at this massive wall of thumbnails for all the content that we've gotten to do and share together means that at the very least, I think I can say I showed up. I might not have made everything the best I wanted to. It may not have turned out every way I wanted it to be. But if I look at that content, I can say I showed up, you guys showed up, we learned some things, and we did the job. We did the work of being here. We did the work of showing up day to day. And I think that's very important. But with that, let's do a little bit of fun stuff. First, it was fun for me, at least. Hopefully you guys will enjoy it too. I want to go over the top 10 most viewed episodes. Now, I will admit, because I do live shows and they're long, the shows that have been out for 2 years are going to be mostly represented. I will say there are some other some shows that I think are interesting that I want to mention as well that I thought were useful, and shows that actually took off and were more popular quicker than other shows. But we're going to go with the top most viewed shows over the last 2 years, and we'll have to see how that goes. So let me take a look at that first. We'll do a little like slideshow is what I want to do. So here's a slideshow of the thumbnails from each one of the most popular shows, going from 10 to 1. And each one of these I have a little message for. So this is the 10th most viewed episode of the Takeup from the first 100. And that is episode 38, Redefining Disaster, Dead Stock, Stitches, and Self-Promo. This episode, we talked all about how to handle things that were going wrong. And honestly, there's a few different things that are interesting about it. But certainly the first thing I'm going to say, the big lesson I'm taking away from this one, everyone makes mistakes. The fact that this was one of the most popular episodes tells me that everyone is concerned with what we do when we make mistakes, and they're worried about this stuff. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has something that they're concerned about making right, and they want to avoid these mistakes. The episode itself talked a lot about how we handle mistakes and how we avoid them and what we do once mistakes are made and how we make things right. The fact that it's popular tells me that all of us feel this way. We all want to make things right. We all feel like we're going to make mistakes and are concerned about it. And when we make mistakes, we're looking for answers to see if we can do better. In the episode, a lot of it was about embroidery problems. Certainly, what did I say was kind of the most salient point for this is that it's all about communication. If we communicate correctly and completely and take good notes when we're interviewing our customers, if we communicate completely with other people in our shops, other people who are receiving goods from us, we are more likely not to make mistakes. We are likely to understand what they need from us. We are likely to correctly communicate down the chain of whatever kind of job we're doing. Even if we're on our own as solopreneurs, even if we're on our own as crafters, if we take notes at every step and we make sure that we communicate and write things down and have complete information, we're less likely to make mistakes along the way. And honestly, if we're in a job where we might be handing off production to someone, if we're digitizers, artists, if we're salespeople, whatever we do, and honestly, in general, even if we're talking about working with contractors, the better information we get in the front end, the better we communicate down the line, the more that we take the responsibility for what we output as our final work that we shouldn't have to be contacted and worked with over and over again. If we communicate clearly and take care with the way we communicate in our information, the chances are is we will have less in the way of mistakes in the first place. And the second point of that is that when we do have mistakes, we should redefine that. Failure is always an option because it's always educational. Should we make the same mistakes over and over again? Absolutely not. But seriously, everyone makes mistakes. I've probably ruined more garments than most people have seen in their lives. As far as embroidered garments, maybe not you folks, but a lot of you guys. I have ruined tons of garments along the way, and especially in testing new things. If you're expanding, if you're learning, you're going to make mistakes. Also, the cool thing is, even when you make mistakes, that doesn't mean we're throwing you in the bin. Same thing with these, the dead stock I was talking about. If you look at this piece over here on the right-hand side, I've actually used these images again. A torn out piece where we had a logo up there that had to be ripped out. Somebody needed to rip that out because the logo turned out poorly. Honestly, ripping it out maybe not be the best option, and patches would have been better. But in this case, we tore the logo out. It didn't look good. The apparel was scarred, but with a light fill and a little bit of design work to make it right, we changed the texture, we saved the garment, and the garment was useful, and it looked like a first quality piece. Even when we make a mistake, it doesn't mean we should throw ourselves out. It doesn't mean we should throw out the work that we did. It is always educational. There is always a potential to bring something useful out of it. And these days where we have stock issues, these days where, honestly, the other thing is visible mending has been taking off. I did an episode where we talked about visible mending. People are more into value over time. And honestly, I just wrote an article that's coming out in Images Magazine talking about this, that people want value over time. They don't want things that we throw away. And now we can repair something and have it look good. We can repair something and have it be useful. We can have garments with longevity that are worth more. And we should understand that those mistakes sometimes are part of this process. And we can even intentionally make it possible for us to salvage things rather than let them fall apart. So everyone makes mistakes, and that's episode number 38. And that was like I said, that was the 10th one there. So 10th one out of the thing. So next most popular episode. Let's go on. This is the next most popular episode. Cap design considerations. So 9 on our list. Episode 21, cap design considerations. And this one I thought was interesting to kind of bring up my overarching lesson that I'm connecting to it. Create in context. Creating context. What does this mean? In the case of cap designs, it means that the design doesn't live separately from the garment. The garment and the design are one thing. They have to be coordinated. And if we do our best work, we work toward the coordinated final option. We work toward the cap. We don't make a logo and slap it on everything. We know what that logo is going on. And when we do our best, most refined work, we think about the whole of the piece we're creating, and maybe even the whole coordinated set of things that we're doing, instead of just the logo as a separate entity. And in this case, I also want to say creating context means this. Know the context you're in, the context you're trying to be in, and create for that context. And also don't judge yourself and judge your work against the context that it is not meant for. You can't judge your work against an audience, against an environment that it's not meant for, that it wasn't designed for. Sometimes something you design goes somewhere new and interesting that it wasn't intended for. But if your work is not fitting properly, let's say this, I make a jacket back. I'm not mad at the jacket back that it doesn't fit on a cap. Not really. And the same thing here, in general, the work that you do is meant for your audience. If another audience doesn't get it, it doesn't necessarily mean the work is bad. It means it may not be a good fit for the context. So the overarching lesson here, create in context. Know the context that you're in, and don't worry that things don't fit in a different context that they're not meant for. And I think it's a good lesson in general, seriously. But that's how it is. In any case, let's go on beyond that. And I'm going to go ahead and grab a couple comments real quick that we have. 104 is technically 2 years, says Jeff. I have other episodes that got on that were not technically part of Takeup, and the first Takeup episode was January 19th, 2 years ago. So technically 2 years, but yes, not 104 episodes yet. And heck, maybe I'll wait for the secret till 104. Maybe you just doomed everybody waiting for 3 more weeks. We'll see. But yeah, I like this one. Number 38, Mike says, it happens to be the birth of the Reciprocators. Awesome. Thank you very much. Love that. So yeah, and Christine says, you're not allowed to complain about grays until they take over your head. Well, yeah, except for I don't have hair enough for it to take over my head. If you ever wonder why I wear a cap, it's because the sun in New Mexico is not kind to bald people. So yeah, I'm allowed to complain about my gray beard just a little bit. I can complain just a little bit about it, folks. All right. So one last thing too, we got one more comment here from Joe Rita. She says, the list of the Takeup is on Stitch Art's Digitizing Fans under files. Need to update it. Yeah, she has actually maintained a list of the episodes. The other thing you can do, if you go to ericcampbell.com, if you go up to the Takeup tab at the top, you're going to find a list of all the stuff under the playlist. If you go view the whole playlist and just instead of just clicking through the one piece that's there, you don't just click on the one video, you click to view the whole playlist, and everything that I've done for the Takeup is there. There are other things on my YouTube channel. Pitfalls of Digitizing and Pillars of Digitizing being two actually very popular videos. They should be in the top 10 if they were Takeup episodes that were also on there. Other live sessions too that are cool. So check that out. But yeah, the list is available out there if you want to get it. Get out to the YouTube channel. It's one of the best ways you can do that. If you're viewing us on Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, go to the YouTube channel, and it's a little bit easier to navigate the entirety of the thing. All right. So let's get on to the next episode in this list. And that was episode 51, Q&A, layering, density, outlines, and selecting stitches. So this one, we talked all about building up borders. We talked about how we do outlining multiple outlines and how we select stitch types to do certain jobs for us. And certainly there was some discussion about digitizing for photographic stuff. There was some discussion about, borders and how they work and whether or not you put a border below or on top of text, things like that. But the overarching lesson that I'm going to take out of this one is what you need may not be obvious. And why do I put that on this particular list? Well, this is something that you've heard me say over and over and over again, and I will continue to say it repeatedly. What you need as far as embroidery shapes in machine embroidery in digitizing may not be obvious to what you're working on. So this is the specifics, right? The specifics of embroidery. If you're talking about borders, very, very frequently people want to outline entire letters. They want to work through things one piece at a time, and they expect an outline to be like you would have for print, where you're going to outline an entire letter all at once, where multiple outlines can overlap, and that's fine. And in the case of building up borders or multiple outlines, especially like what we were talking about here, if you look at some of these pieces like that we have in Redcliffe, where we have some of these overlaps inside of the borders, where we have some of these things that are not entirely separated, they're built out of shapes that are not obvious in the art. The shapes you have in vector art, even if you can import them, are very infrequently the shapes you need for embroidery, very infrequently. And so in this case, I would say the general lesson for machine embroidery and for digitizing is what we get as far as art, what we're looking at, the images that are in front of us are very infrequently made up of the shapes we actually need to successfully embroider. And that doesn't necessarily include textures or any of the more artistic stuff that can be related to it. Certainly it's part of it. But even in just doing outlines, even in just doing borders, we have to think about how we're building our digitized files. We have to think about how we're interpreting the art. And invariably, the shapes that are there, even if they're vector, even if they're clean and we can reuse them, those shapes are not the shapes that we need for embroidery. That's not the shapes we need. We have to make what we need. And sometimes what we have to do is see past what's right in front of our face to make what we need. And that's why I kind of put this as the general list. What you need may not be obvious. And in relation to the entire show, I'm going to say this. I started out the Takeup on a whim almost. I wouldn't say that I didn't have any plans or that I didn't intend to do it. But if it wasn't for certainly not only just the kind of impetus that people were doing lives and it was coming up more often and people had asked me to do some lives, it's also the people who said, hey, just try it, just do it. And the fact that this is something that has become what it is, that we've gotten 100 episodes away, that people have kind of lauded it. I've seen it shared places I didn't expect, and it's gotten its own audience that I didn't expect, tells me that I wasn't obviously aware of what I needed as far as content creation. I wasn't sure of what you needed as far as the lives. And part of it had to be done on the fly. It had to be worked on. And I had to see past the plan in front of me. I had to see past what was in front of me and what seemed obvious and just work toward what it was I needed to build up a foundation and do it on the fly to some degrees. And sometimes you have to do that here too. The shapes that you need in embroidery may not be obvious from the art. We have to look at how we build and build piece by piece and break that up and learn. And certainly experience is going to say a lot about that. Also, this, what you need might not be obvious. Sometimes you have to take that first step. And I'm going to say this, I have to thank people who encourage me to do that. And among them, certainly Brian Bailey, I guess you guys know, Creative and Brilliance. He definitely said, go ahead and do it. It's time to start. Lisa Shaw, believe it or not, before I was doing this show, asked me to do a live for the Stitch Artist group and just said, hey, can you talk a little bit about embroidery and how you learned? And I did. I jumped on and talked about that. Funny enough, that video has resurfaced on Facebook again today. Somebody commented on like a 3-year-old video almost. And these things are all part of what came to be the Takeup. I wasn't sure I needed to do the Takeup until I was already doing lives, until the problem was in front of me of how we do this. In fact, I started the Takeup just pre-pandemic. And then once the pandemic started, that it wasn't obvious that this was the answer to not being able to do trade shows all the time and not seeing everybody all the time, but it became the answer. And it was not something that I would have known right on the surface. So next in the list, right? So we have already had a few pieces already. So we are out beyond that. We are going to the next one. And that is episode 36, Stitch Types and Motifs in Machine Embroidery. So why is that important, right? What do we look about with stitch types, and why do I think that's something that has an overarching lesson? Well, certainly stitch types and motifs, they seem fairly basic, right? It's the basic elements of machine embroidery. It's the things that everything else is made out of. These are the elements. These are the essentials. And so this was a lesson that I wanted to go from on this. Know the essentials elementally. What do I mean by that? Well, that we all know what stitch types are, certainly. But if we know how to address basic stitch types, what they are, how they operate, what they do as far as making shapes, creating coverage, making textures in a design, if we understand what stitch types are. We understand what a satin stitch is good for. We know what a fill stitch is good for. We know what a straight stitch, manual stitches are good for, what they do. So we're thin, narrow elements, things that have a turning radius. We're on satins, thicker elements, larger areas of coverage. We're usually using fills, but then we think about when we get past that, okay, well, what can we do if we overlap satins, if we combine them in different ways? If we start from a basic understanding of the elements and we know those, we know them elementally, the essentials, we understand them thoroughly, we can build from there to make whatever we want. And I think that's true of almost anything we do. If you learn the foundations, if you learn the basics, and you work from the basics up, you don't worry about learning how to make the masterpiece, you worry about how to make a brush stroke. If we start there, especially when the masterpiece feels too big, when the larger element feels too big, when the project feels too big, we stop working on the last mile and we work on the first step. And I know it sounds contrite, it sounds cheesy, or it sounds trite, it sounds cheesy, it sounds like something that anyone has said a million times over. It's on every motivational poster. But the truth of the matter is, when we're working on big designs, something I want to talk about a little bit after this, parsing things down into manageable chunks is also how we have to think about it for embroidery, for creating individual elements that build up into something larger, and honestly, to a degree, for the execution of the piece itself. Breaking things down into manageable chunks, working on the elements is important. Also, if you don't know how to manage a stitch, you can't manage a collection of stitches, you can't manage a design. If you understand pull on one stitch, if you understand push on a small collection of stitches like a satin or a fill, then you will understand how to deal with distortion in your entire design. But it starts with the basics. It starts with the elements. I think that's fairly important too. So that's what I'm saying. The basics can be it. And I'll say, yeah, this one too here. By the way, couple of comments while we're here. Why not? But Frank says, you look more distinguished with a touch of gray. I'm getting more distinguished by the moment. But yeah, I'll just say that a little bit of gray was certainly unavoidable this year. Yeah. Ramon is saying 52 weeks a year, 2 years, 104. Yep. We're coming up on that. Hopefully soon we'll have 104 live episodes so we can have 2 years of once a week content, or honestly, binge-worthy content you can just pile through if you're someone who's going for it, because we're living in the Netflix era and that's just how it's going to be. Letty's here to say happy 100. By the way, Letty, who created Sippy, the Reciprocator character that we all know and love, and I don't have a picture of Sippy here with me right now, and I should. Thank you for contributing and for always being an awesome contributor. It was great meeting you out in Fort Worth, especially. And Jorita says, yes, back to the basics is key. And that's the thing. I think that no one gets past the basics. And the other thing is, when we start introducing new elements, like let's say I want to work on a new thread type, a new fabric type, I go back and I stitch out swatches of fill at different densities. I stitch out different underlays. I stitch out satin stitches and see how it behaves. Because if I can understand how the satin stitch behaves on this new material or in this new thread at the densities that I've set, if I understand it in the microcosm, I will understand it in the macrocosm. I will understand it in the larger picture for sure. So next on our list of most popular episodes, let's go ahead and get back to that. After this one, so stitch types, motifs, like I said, my thing was know the essentials elementally, and that's going to help you figure things out. And we have some kind of wild cards here. So let's go to the next one. The next one was lettering, fonts, and ambigrams. And if you guys know me, I am all about typography and fonts. Got to teach a class on it this year, and I already have new stuff that I want to teach on creating fonts. I may have to revise that class and make it something a little bit bigger, a little bit longer. It was only an hour and a half class about. But, I'm going to do another one on that soon. I have to, because lettering and fonts are huge with me. And also ambigrams. You don't know what an ambigram is. In the case of the one you're looking there, the Eric ambigram that's on that patch, it is a rotational ambigram, meaning if you see it face up like this and you rotate it 180 degrees, it reads the same as it does when it's facing in front of you. The normal orientation, you can rotate it 180 and it will look exactly the same. So those are ambigrams, but I talk a lot about lettering and fonts. And honestly, a couple of other episodes that I really loved were the jargon 1 and 2 episodes. Those episodes talked a lot about typography and typography jargon, and also just the nomenclature, the name of all the parts of the letter. And I find that we do so much lettering in digitizing and embroidery that knowing the parts of the letter has actually been very valuable to me and helped me to understand things. And also knowing how to break letters apart. So the lettering, fonts, and ambigrams episode is huge. I think that's something that's awesome that we got to talk about it, and including kind of the weird stuff, the ambigrams. You see the stitches ambigram down there in the corner too. the reason I love anagrams so much is we're taking letters apart, and it's something we do constantly in digitizing. You want to talk about being elemental. Seeing a letter, a glyph, as a collection of strokes that are broken down to individual satin stitches or stitch types, it really helps us to understand things if we take them apart in those elements. But in this case, it's also just cool that we got to talk about ambigrams where we're manipulating those strokes to change the look. That is so much of what we do in embroidery is manipulating the elements that are in front of us. Now, this one is more in a design phase when we're making an ambigram, but thinking differently about the shapes that are in front of you is something that's good for the brain, for a digitizer. But the other thing I want to talk about with this is that this episode, by all means, is something that I just wanted to do. People had asked me about some of the lettering projects I do, and I tend to draw a few ambigrams a year. I don't always have a lot of time, but I will draw a few of them when I get an itch at least once a year to start making ambigrams. And this is the thing about that. I think you should always follow your curiosity and passion as much as you can. Not every day, not every way will you be able to do everything that you're passionate about or that you have a curiosity for. But if you follow a legitimate curiosity, a legitimate passion towards something, it will show. People will see that and they will resonate with the fact that you have passion. And in fact, the fun thing about this is I know as a kid, I was the kind of kid who would tell you all about something I was excited about and drive everybody nuts with all of the things that I wanted to discuss about this thing that I was learning. As adults, that same kind of energy is often what makes you, interesting to people. It draws, especially now that we have this long tail, individual tribes of people who are into the niche thing that we are into. That can be something that starts a market for your company. That kind of passion can be something that starts education for you, that you derive a community from, that will support you and that you can support. And that kind of energy that drove people nuts when I was a kid is the kind of energy I bring to education now. And honestly, what gets me high marks when people review my courses when I'm out traveling at the trade shows. Follow your curiosity and passion, and let it be a little weird. I also had a great episode that I got to talk about Viking Age art. If you've ever seen some of my personal embroideries, there's a lot of Viking Age, early Scandinavian, medieval art that I like to do, or Anglo-Saxon art as well, interlaced art. Something that I like to do personally is revise historical finds and archaeological finds and make embroideries from them. It's something that's rare. It's just for me, but I have managed to have that in magazines. I've managed for that to be something people sought me out for, and I've done kind of large scale projects based on that. And it's also informed some of the work I do in general, because learning how to work on an interlace on something that's like Celtic knotwork is what people are really familiar with, but other kinds of interlaced pieces, the ins and outs, the layering, the things that are on top or underneath as far as strokes help with font digitizing, help with pathing and sequencing. They help get your brain around things that are elemental to embroidery. And like I said, on top of that, this is how you build your tribe. Be yourself, follow your curiosity, follow your passion, run it down, learn and share. And this is how you build the tribe that follows you, that supports you, that will be there with you on this journey. And I think the thing is, you don't always know what's going to be the favorite thing for people. This was one of those episodes where people really enjoyed it, and I'm surprised to see it up here in the top 10. But it's something that people really loved and enjoyed and followed through with on me. They followed through with my passion on this thing. And I think part of it is because I'm excited about lettering. I'm excited about type. And it's not something that's necessarily all that exciting on its face unless you're guided through it by somebody who is excited about it. And I think that's the same thing with us with embroidery. It's the same thing with any of our hobbies. And when we're talking about niche marketing and what that means to be part of a niche group, being excited, having that be part of your passion is a big deal and can provide purposefulness, and it can provide you that feeling of belonging that brings you trust and helps you to serve that community and helps that community trust you and invest in you too. So following your passion is important, and certainly following that curiosity. You never know how things all tie together, but when you get them in mind and you let those things marinate, new connections are formed, and different art forms, different parts of your world will collide, different parts of your mental landscape will collide, and these new things that come together will increase in creativity. They will come together and create these new combinations, these novel things that you might not have thought about otherwise, and help you solve problems in a novel way. So run down your curiosity and passion, and don't worry too much about sharing something weird. You'll find a tribe for it. Might not happen immediately, might not be a good fit for the tribe you're in now, but it's worthwhile to do, both because it's good for you and because it is something that will increase and help your creativity in general. Let's grab a couple more comments. We have people commenting for sure. So always fun stuff. Kim says E-Rich. Yeah, one of Terry Combs' favorite name for me, and not one of mine, but hey, you know what? I'll take it as a term of endearment. Just congrats on your 100th. Thank you very much, Keith. Awesome work you're doing out there, Keith. By the way, I envy your TikTok game. Congrats on your 100th, Eric. Thanks for all you do for the industry. Thank you for being a friend always. And Brian says, knowing your apertures and counters makes you a whole digitizer. Oh man, got a dad joke in there, Brian. And he is a dad, so he knows better. Happy 100th. Yes, knowing your apertures and your counters on your logo, on your logo types, on your lettering and typography is huge. Big deal. Oh, Crystal says, love this. I'm doing a calligraphy course and it has made me start thinking of the individual strokes. You will be a better digitizer for fonts and lettering than anyone who hasn't done this. I've done calligraphy personally. I'm not a great calligrapher, but I've done it. I've written up some scrolls for SCA people. If you don't know who that is, the people who do Society for Creative Anachronism do some medieval reenactment. I didn't do any reenactment really, but I sure did draw some scrolls for people at the time. And that environment, that working on a text longhand like that, and especially when you're talking about strokes and thick and thinness of lines, a wide pen, a calligraphy pen, is a really good analog for a satin stitch. So if nothing else, watch calligraphy videos. Having trouble with lettering, watch calligraphy videos and see how they're put together. It's not a one-to-one analog for embroidery, but it's really interesting and might help you think about the way you construct letterings for sure. Jarita says, haven't tried negative space for lettering yet. It's on my bucket list. Awesome. Aaron says, hi. Hi, Aaron. Happy to have you in. And maybe we'll talk, Joanne. Would I be considered to be a future guest? Maybe hit me up. We'll see. Really busy in February, maybe. I like to help out wherever I can. So Joanne, let me know. And Aaron says, congratulations on the 100th. Thank you very much. All right, let's get back to that top 10 real quick. Why not? Let's finish it up. So lettering, fonts, and anagrams. What's the big deal with that, folks? Follow your curiosity and passion. Go for it. And the next one will be kind of funny because this was the very first episode that I called the Takeup, so the thumbnail doesn't work. It doesn't show you anything. But what this one was about 3D foam. And the kind of fun answer to what I call the, the overarching message from this one is be dimensional. And what I mean by that in this one is that people really do like dimensional embroidery. Embroidery in itself is a dimensional art, even without 3D foam. 3D foam has not left since it's become a part of what we do for embroidery. And I've taught it over and over. I've seen other people teach it very well. Justin among them, who's here watching along with you guys. 3D foam is going to be here with us. And the reason why I think it's interesting is because embroidery is a way for us to create a textural, dimensional object. And especially for me, when I started in embroidery, why I was so excited about it, I had done some digital art. Now, you guys know I'm a humanities guy. I learned medieval studies in English. That I'm not an artist primarily. I never was. I became somewhat of an artist, if you want to call it that. I do fair design work. But the thing that made me so excited when I was a kid working on this stuff is I had done some digital art, some pixel art, clicking piece by piece to make 256 color pixel art on an older computers. And when I saw the embroidery machine was possible, I found out after I was an operator, I found out how you could use digitizing software to make the files for this stuff. It was something that was available to me. I was so excited because I knew I could now do something on a computer that could become real in the real world. And it was made of real objects. It was, I mean, honestly, the way 3D printing is now, you never know. I might have been an excellent 3D printer or a CNC guy if that was what I was around. But I was around embroidery. So that's what I learned. But the ability to make something real and physical in the world from something digital was something very interesting to me. But the other thing about it was it's dimensional and textural. And as I've worked in embroidery throughout my life, throughout my career, I have always understood that there is something about this texture, both touching the texture, seeing the texture, the light and shadow that is unique to embroidery, that even among other high density or formed pieces, even among molded items, PVC patches, the other things that have dimension and texture, embroidery is unique. The nature of the thread, and in this case, the nature of the applied materials, the nature of the foam, are unique in creating this dimension and texture. The other kind of the overarching message I'm taking out of it that means more than the thing is that we also should be bold and dimensional, stick out a little bit. I spent a lot of my life trying to fit in. I still sometimes feel that way. Like I'm a little bit of a square peg in a round hole. At the same time, It is the things that are strange about us that give our characters depth. It is the weirdness about us that becomes interesting when we get older, that when we were kids was something slightly annoying about us, or something weird that made us nerds or strange. It is the depth of passion, it is the weirdness, it is the boldness, it is the dimension that makes us interesting now. So share those things. And like I said about following your passion earlier, but yeah, be a little weird, be dimensional, be bold, and let a little bit of that texture out. I think it's something that's real. It's something that makes it unique. So the unique qualities that you have and the unique qualities your work has are worthwhile and should be part of what you do always. So yeah, 3D foam is always going to be there in embroidery. And honestly, in general, I think that understanding the dimensionality of embroidery is critical to making the best embroidery you can make. 3D foam is the natural extension of that stuff for sure. We'll go ahead and bring in a comment from Keith here. About 70% of the hats we do are 3D foam. We love it, and some days we hate it. Usually it's the file. Yeah, and I'll say this, 3D foam, since I have taught it repeatedly, I think it's fair, and I'm sure other people who have taught it will say the same as I do here. 3D foam is a holistic venture. If your digitizing is not right, I mean, that's the first thing. You must have a file that is made for 3D foam correctly, that has the proper end caps, that has the proper densities, that the angles are balanced in such a way that you don't end up too tight in the corners, too tight in the inside edges of curves. You have to have all those elements there, the proper elements for cutting and covering. But if you don't have good foam, if your thread tensions aren't good, if your materials don't match with what you're doing, if your needle doesn't match to the materials in the thread, if you any part of this is out of control and any part of that is not thought of, if you don't have a holistic approach, you will fail at 3D foam. 3D foam will show the weakness in your process. Whether that's your digitizing or your materials or the way your machine is set up, 3D foam has a way of stress testing things. Now, these days, with machines that have presser feet that rise and lower, and sometimes maybe digitally controlled or have different dwell times, we now have more and more tools that are geared toward 3D foam. I did most of my 3D foam work on standard machines, but at the same time, it's like now it's a little easier. And even then, with people with brand new modern machines, I still have people who have different ways of thinking they can do 3D foam, and certainly who still have problems time to time based on whether or not the design is well made for 3D foam. Does it have nice wide strokes? Does it have areas that are good for 3D foam? Whether or not the design is digitized well for it once it's interpreted, whether or not they've used good materials, if they have nice high density foam, are they using something from a craft store, or are they using something that compresses too much? Invariably, 3D foam will out something that's weak in your process. And I'll go ahead and bring up one more comment. Mike says, the Madeira 3D foam webinar is the first thing I found of Eric's. The rabbit hole has a wide satin stitch cover on it. Yeah, no doubt. One of the earlier webinars that I did for Madeira, still to this day popular, still downloaded, still get questions about it regularly. The one thing I have to update on that is when I first started out, there were no high density foams. And the foams that we have now hold up to more stitching than foams used to. I now teach a little bit about using fill over foam. Still not my favorite. I'm a fan of the old school big wide satin stitches. You guys will also notice the ka-chunk that I talked about. That's that long, slow stroke that we often do over those wide satin stitches. Your machine makes the ka-chunk sound. Those wide satin stitches are still my favorite, but these days you can get away with a lot more with foam than you ever could before, both because the materials are good and because the machines handle a little bit better. But yeah, 3D foam's with us. And like I said, be dimensional, both yourself and enjoy the dimension of embroidery. It's something that's worthwhile. It's something I teach over and over, foam or otherwise. That's a unique quality, and those unique qualities make things what they are. Give them the spice. All right, the next episode from there is Design Analysis Silent Teachers, and this one is a big favorite for me. So episode 8. And like I said, some of the earlier episodes just have more views on them because they've been around longer. But this one I think is valuable for a couple different reasons. Certainly, design analysis, this is how I learned digitizing almost entirely. I started out digitizing entirely on my own. I did not have somebody teach me. I had the manual for my software. It was not a particularly wonderful manual, but it's okay. And I had files. I had files both that were made from people who had done punching, true punching, one stitch at a time on the big Digitrack boards, the 6-to-1 reduction or blow up, whatever you want to call it, of the cartoon, 6-to-1 ratio between the design and the cartoon. They were punching each individual stitch. It was marked out with a wheel. It was done more like architecture. and it was done individually. I had pieces like that. I had pieces from early digitizers who did have digital tools that did automatic filling, things like that. And I looked at these designs, I analyzed them, I measured densities, I measured overlaps, I measured how wide the satin stitches were, and then I started to also measure how the stitches were different on the fabric versus what they looked like in the software. Were things thicker or thinner? Were openings larger or smaller, depending on how they worked? And I analyzed these designs and replicated those pieces. And you could certainly say I copied. I think that is fair. The best work we do at first is by copying others. We shouldn't bite or steal or redistribute that work. But the way we learn is by copying. That is how a child learns, is the way we learn. But the design analysis, measuring those designs, looking at the stitch lengths, the angles, the way different objects came together, and writing notes about it, doing deep analysis, absolutely was how I learned to digitize. And it was a massive shortcut compared to having to just completely learn by myself. That's what made it possible for me to digitize on my own. If you can get instruction to stop you from doing the amount of trial and error and analysis that I did, great. But anytime you see something in front of you that's made of stitches, especially if you have that file, you can analyze it and replicate it and take the elements and remix them into something new that is yours. And the thing that I think is the overarching message here is to learn from those who came before you. Whether that is parents, historical figures, if this is literature, if these are designs that you're analyzing, learn from those who came before you and analyze and work. Will you replicate everything they do constantly? No. Should you do exactly as I do, as they did, as someone else has done before us? No. Learn what's good there. Use it as a stepping stone and make something entirely of your own and surpass someone who's teaching you. By all means, I've had somebody ask that before, like, what about when someone does it better than you taught them how to do it? What if they do something new and better? I'm like, I'll be taking notes then. That's what. Also, that is the whole point. Why would I be teaching if I didn't want somebody to learn and do something better? I don't want this to be the end of digitizing, the end of embroidery. If it dies with me, it wasn't worth a whole lot. Learn from those who came before you, but then take that, remix it, and make it entirely your own, and understand that those who came before you want that. They might not say they want that. They might not be able to tell you, but that's the point. That's what we do. That's the human race. It's why we write things down. It's why there's literature. It's why there's culture, to a degree, to a great degree. It's because we are trying to encode something that we can't just genetically give everyone thereafter. We need to let this language, let this learning become something that is built from later as a foundation. Learn from those who came before you. Stand on the shoulders of giants and reach higher. Analyze designs. Learn from those who are around you. Learn from your compatriots. Learn from the people who have done the work before you did it. Don't lament that you're not doing the work individually by yourself from the get-go. Take that foundation, take what you learn and build something new, and then share it and let everyone learn from you. So it's both about that conversation with those who have done something before and the conversation we're all having together as we create in this craft as one unit, as a whole craft. This is us, right? This is what we're doing. We love what we do. We share what we do, and everyone has something to share, and everyone has been the first to do some form of something in their community they can share back. So learn from those things. Analyze what's around you. Certainly copy, rip, and then take the things you rip and copy. There's nothing new under the sun. Make something new as far as new combinations. I'm a big believer in that if we all have this conversation together, we arrive at some truths we might not have arrived at on our own. And in taking in these things that are from different perspectives than the ones that we have, we may learn something new or find a new way to solve problems that we didn't have before. And certainly that we should look at the original people who've done the job we do, who've done the work we want to do, and say, what did they learn? What can I learn from them? And how can I make my own version? Also, how can I see that and see what they worked at, see what made sense about it? So big deal. Like I said, design analysis is huge. Analyze designs that people have in front of you that you like. You see a fill stitch you like, measure the angle, the stitch length, and the density, and you can replicate it. Certainly, you may have to work on the pattern stepping somewhat depending on your software and how it works, but there is not that much that we can't create. And frankly, no matter the software you have, if it's made of stitches, if it was on a conventional embroidery machine, you can recreate anything you've seen. The tools are there for you. They might be slower, they might be faster, they may be automated, they might not. But the truth of the matter is, if you can see it, you can make it. If you can analyze it, you can replicate it. There is only one stitch in machine embroidery. It is a single point from one point to the next, one needle penetration to the next, and it's a straight line. It varies only in the length of the stitch and how those stitches are aligned with each other, how they're lined up next to each other. If we can learn from that, if we can analyze what's in front of us, we can make whatever we want to make. So that's also about that elemental learning. So learn those essentials elementally, and definitely learn from those who've gone far before you, and analyze. It's a good thing to do. All right. So let's go on to the next one. We're almost done with our top 10. So let's keep on going with another fun one. Episode 40, Pixel Art and Embroidery, A Study in Stitch Angles. And this one shocked me. I couldn't believe how far up the list this was, right? Because this is something like, this is the third most watched. Why is this? Honestly, I think because pixel art has a broader focus, and it's something that people are interested in, and it has a wider category. Not to mention, it's something that has a deep niche value to certain people. So the thing that I wanted to kind of expand on from this was, despite my surprise that this was kind of a popular episode, it does teach us something about what we can do. Most of my episodes are very much geared toward broader pictures. Design analysis is a broad picture. It's something that goes over several genres, and different types of designs can be analyzed, and it covers a wide swath of tools. It is a basic elemental tool, but you can't be afraid to dig deep sometimes. Sometimes the niche, sometimes following something down and working toward the depth, the niche, the details can be really valuable. And in this case, this is a very particular type of embroidery, one type that is only used under a certain circumstance. I definitely talked about stitch angles, color variation, how stitch angles affect the look of embroidery and texture as part of this. But it really was about a pixel art piece and about certain kinds of pixel art that were popular at the time. This type of embroidery isn't as popular as it was at the time. It was a trend that was going around. I still love the look of the kind of the paved pixel art embroidery that has these broad changes in stitch angle. But, it's not something that necessarily is applicable to everything. You wouldn't do every logo in pixel art style like this. You wouldn't do these weird switching of angles. So here's the thing. Sometimes it's worthwhile to dig deep. Get deep into a topic, get deep into a niche, follow it down, and analyze something pretty deeply and share those detailed pieces. Also, it's okay to have something very focused that might not be for everybody, but it is for a certain group of people. That's totally fine. Dig deep on these things sometimes. And you'll also find, funny enough, even though you dig deep, even though you get detailed, even though you get focused, when I talked about this, it also turned into a conversation of pull and push compensation. One of the most basic elements of embroidery. How do I keep a satin stitch the width that I want and the length that I want? How do I keep elements registered so that when two elements are close to each other, we don't have gaps and we don't have issues with the way that they're coming together? We don't have things running over things they shouldn't be or not meeting them. So at the same time as going deep on this style, there were some generalities revealed that were useful to everybody. You can't be afraid to get deep for a couple of reasons, because you might find that people are interested in that particular thing. You'll have that tribe. People will want to follow it up, but also because you don't know, in learning that very specific thing, how that might influence other things you need to learn, and what other generalities you might learn as part of the process. What else might you learn about embroidery as a whole? Both of these things can be true at the same time. And it's certainly part of the category of things I always talk about, where I'm like, you never know what thing is going to be someone's favorite. Those of us who create things, we have favorites of our own, favorite episodes, favorite embroidery designs, favorite designs in general, favorite things we write, favorite products we create that may not be everybody's favorite. And also, we may make something as a cast-off, one-off, super niche product that we don't think has a broad audience, and then find out that it is one of the most popular things we've ever made. We are not our audience. And that's something I'm going to come back to again shortly. But yeah, we're not our audience. We are creating for an audience that may or may not be us, and we may not be aware of that stuff. So sometimes we can't be afraid to dig deep on a topic and give it a go. The thing is, you have to realize that this is a conglomeration. We sometimes look at one project we do as if it's our entire career. So we worry about digging deep on this one project or doing something people won't like. Whereas the truth of the matter is, our career is a wide span of things that change over time. And honestly, this episode might not be popular now. It was for a while. They're very popular. It might get popular again if this becomes a retro style people want to try out again in a few years. This thing might have another renaissance. The life of this thing we don't know. And on top of it, you wouldn't judge the entirety of all the embroidery I've ever made by one little pixel RPG slime character that I did for this thing. It's not the encapsulation of everything I do. And once this design was finished, because I started on something else afterwards, because I did another episode, because I did another 60 episodes, this one piece isn't everything I did. Even if I was worried that not everybody would like this, follow it up with consistent work, and the one piece you do is not going to either fully hold up or be the only tent pole in your entire career. It will only be part of the whole. So sometimes we have to let ourselves go and say, I'm going to dig deep. I'm going to do something interesting and focused and niche, and not worry about that audience not being perfect or for everyone, or that everyone wants it, but that it is for someone, and it might not even be for now. It's following up the passions, but it's also just going ahead and doing something specific and seeing what there is in it, because it might be for someone we don't know yet. It might be for another time. It might color something else we haven't understood that we discover in the process. And we might also find things that are general that are born out of the very specific. So that's another one. Yeah, like I said, dig deep. Do something interesting, dig deep, do something niche, and try it out. That's an interesting thing to learn from that for sure, and something I didn't expect. All right, next on the list, we're up to the top two, and this is going to be kind of fun. Top two. All right, episode 11, patches. The emblematic embroidery item, where I talked about patches, what they were and what they fit into, how they fit into the market, and just in general. And funny enough, with this one, patches, I see other people out there, and I think it's fair for me to say I taught a patch class just at Impressions Expo, did a 3-hour piece for that. I did a big webinar. The Understanding Emblems webinar that I did last year was one that really took off. Lots of people watched that one and loved it. Patches have been a part of my career multiple times for different reasons. Designed a lot of patches for local police and military, did a lot of patches for movies and TV. You guys know about Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul and some of the other ones I did, Night Shift for NBC. Those are the big ones. But there's a bunch of other shows and movies I did patches for. The truth of the matter is I've done patches for particular people for particular reasons several times throughout my career, and they were different each time. And also what I'm going to say is I know Jeff from Fuller Embroidery Works and the Embroidery Nerd, he's going to teach a patch class. And he's done a lot of different patches. He started from a collector's perspective and then started making more and more patches. And Matt Enderle from Patch Phrase did different patches. And I see those guys doing patches and teaching them now. And they know stuff I don't know, or they have done different kinds of patches that are different in their materials too. There are different ways we all come out and do this stuff for different reasons. The funny thing is, just like the patches themselves, I sell patches to people as something that makes your embroidery product line more versatile. And that's what I'm going to say is the lesson here. Be versatile, like patches. Patches are good for so many different things, and so many of us also make them differently and still come up with awesome patches. We come up with awesome emblems, and multiple ways of attacking this thing will produce a viable emblem that is useful in so many ways. Patches are versatile because we have this non-sized item. It can be used for anybody. It can be used for self-service decoration on any garment, so it helps us with stocking problems. It's cheap to ship a patch. You can throw it in an envelope. It is not like a full garment. We can get high margins if we're doing it correctly and we're pricing correctly. It allows us to decorate on items that we can't stitch through, so we can either adhere a patch or we can use other methods to stitch through. If we can't do direct embroidery, we can use a patch either on hard items. We can adhere or glue it to an item that can't be stitched through at all, or we can stitch it on light items that can't take a lot of embroidery, so that we don't do all of the stitching through the super light material, and we can have the patch on top of that. And that patch, that kind of emblem might be something where we want less body and have it softer, or if we're doing it on hard goods, we might want it harder, or if we're sending it out as an object, as an item that's going to live as a collectible by itself, we may want a stiffer material or a stiffer layer of heat seal or adhesive on the back, depending on who's going to use it. They're very versatile, and I think we should be that way too. So be versatile. Understand that you have ways you can attack problems that are different than everyone does, and also allow for the versatility of everyone else to be part of this discussion with you, including sometimes your competition. Everyone answers questions differently. Learn to answer those questions the best you can in your way, and people will come to you who fit with that. But like the patches, be versatile. Understand that there's multiple ways we can attack things, and sometimes we get hung up on doing things one certain way or worrying that we're not doing things the way other people are doing them. But if we have viable results, those are viable results, whether or not it's not exactly the same as everybody else. And the great thing about that is it also allows us to realize we can allow the tide to rise and lift all the ships, that we don't have to try and control every little thing. Our method will apply to our tribe. And if we keep sharing the work we want to do, working in the way that we think is best, and we make sure that it fits with our audience that we want to get to, we're going to find that tribe is going to support us and be with us in this. And we don't necessarily have to try and capture everything and also dominate or push everyone else out. So patches are versatile. We should be versatile too. And I think that the cool thing about this particular piece, at least episode 11, is because we were really talking about the generality of what patches are good for and why they're an emblematic embroidery item and why they have such longevity. The other thing we can do is think about being evergreen. A lot of what we do can survive beyond the moment. Patches are one of those things. Patches and emblems are evergreen. They keep coming back. They're always useful, and there's always been a place for them as long as there's been embroidery. So that's just something awesome. I think to talk about versatility, we should also realize that we ourselves can be versatile. We can be in multiple places, but we can also realize that the market itself and the craft itself, it is versatile, but it also covers so many genres, so many methods, so many applications that multiple people can do it differently and still have a place in this conversation. And we can all point to someone else's good work and say, that's good work, and I appreciate that, without worrying that our work is somehow lessened by the fact that other people do it differently, or that we all have a way to do it or a place that we fit. So be versatile, but understand everyone else's versatility. And certainly, hey, patches are awesome. So we're talking about that multiple times. But yeah, Evelyn says, love doing patches. So do I. Certainly, I do them a little different than other people. I do a softer patch that's meant to stitch on more. I don't do as much layering adhesives or support materials. Other people do. Certainly have done them. But, it's the thing is, every time I talk to people about doing patches, people find their own way to different ways of attachment, different ways of creation, and awesome. They come out in much the same way, or at least they come out with viable patches that people love and people use. And I think that's really fantastic. So we'll go ahead and say, I will talk about this another time, Joanne. This is something that is in episode 12, and we can talk about this again. You describe how the satin stitch outline for a patch digitized differently from satin stitch outline on a patch. I think you're talking about just outline of something else versus a patch. That is deeper in the next episode and the number one episode that I did. We'll just let that be the way we started on. Patches 2, episode 12, patch specific digitizing tips. So Joanne, your question is answered in episode 12. So thank you for the segue. I think Cindy says the patch class you taught added onto the other patch classes some of the members taught have all great ideas. That's fantastic. Thank you, Cindy. But yeah, that episode 12, was actually the top most watched patch class and most watched episode of the Takeup so far. It's been watched over time. Now, admittedly, episode 12, it's had some time. It's had legs. It had time to really find its audience. But what I'm going to say is people are interested in making these things. So one of the lessons, and I know it's funny to say that, one of the big lessons is, hey, folks, know your audience. Why do I say that? Well, when I originally set out to do the patch episodes, I wasn't going to split that up into 2 episodes. It went long and we talked a lot about the market for patches, but I realized that patches were holding on and people were like, they wanted more. They wanted to talk about patches. And I'll admit, even when I teach in person, if I ever put a patch on the table, if I show on my sample table that I've made any kind of patch, whatever kind that is, whether it's the standard satin clean cut edge stuff that I did previously, the faux marrow stitches that I used to do, the marrow-ly stuff I've done with Brian now with Brilliance. Every time I put out a patch of any kind, any emblem I've done, someone will ask how to make it no matter what else I'm teaching. I could be teaching pricing, and if one of those is anywhere near me, they're going to ask how to make it. So I already knew patches were impressive, and certainly interesting to people. But when I was doing this episode, I realized, hey man, these are the part 2s. I don't know if it's the first part 2, but I think it might be. This may be the first time I carried over into a part 2, and I realized, I had other things that I wanted to talk about. I had plans. But just like patches, number 1, I wanted to be versatile. And number 2, you got to know your audience. Sometimes you just got to give the people what they want. And sometimes what they want is more patches. I know that certainly is the case right now. People are talking about them quite a lot still. And what I'll say is I've learned from other folks. I hope they've learned some things from me. And in the total, we've learned how to make an item that is helping people out. So that's the cool thing about it, knowing your audience. When I first made patches, I specifically started to make a decoration option for items that I couldn't put under my embroidery machine. That was the thing. Like, that is what I was after. I had items that I could not embroider. At the time, patch hats were thought of as not just retro, they were thought of as corny. They were not the way to go. If you tried to offer somebody at that point in time a 6-panel hat or a 5-panel trucker with a patch on the front of it, they'd be like, what is this John Deere retro stuff that you're giving me? I don't want this stuff. This is not what I like. This looks like a seed corn hat that a farmer wears. They were wanting direct embroidery because patches on hats were a way we used to decorate cylindrical items we couldn't put on a machine when the machines were all flat. I mean, that was the concept. Patches on hats were not old school, they were passe. That is not the case now. Patches on hats are everywhere. It keeps coming back cyclically, and I'll say it's been hanging on for a long time this time. I've been talking about patches for like 8 years or more, kind of really championing the idea of being able to do small run patches yourself. But the first time I did it, I had items that I just couldn't get an embroidery machine into. I couldn't get the cylinder arm into, or they wouldn't stitch through, and I had to make some kind of decoration to make it work. The audience I had needed a decoration. I had to find a solution, so patches were it. The thing is, through the years, the audience for patches has changed, and the way we make the patches has changed. And you have to know your audience and give them what they want to some degree. And honestly, you have to know what they need in order to serve them well. So knowing your audience means a lot of things. Number one, sometimes we need to not worry that it's not our favorite thing that we're providing for people. I'm going to talk about that again. The truth is, you are not your audience. So knowing your audience helps you to serve them better and work perhaps toward not serving yourself. Yes, our work should serve ourselves. We should be interested in our work, but we have to understand sometimes that when our work isn't satisfying us, if it is solving the problems of the person we're doing the work for, then it doesn't matter that we don't love it or it's not the most beautiful, the most creative thing we've ever done. Someone else may be getting usefulness out of it. It also is the truth that often we judge our work harshly because we don't think it's the best thing we've ever done. I feel that way sometimes about this. 100th episode was supposed to be this big giant thing. And here I am giving you this rundown of lessons. There should have been confetti and cannons going off and fireworks. Something should have happened that was bigger or better. I have to wait on the one thing I was planning until at least next week to get that going for you guys. I felt bad about that. What I have to realize, though, is you guys have been here for me all this time. This is the kind of content that I bring. What I'm hoping for is knowing the audience, that you guys are here for that, and that you understand that I'm going to bring that value to you as best I can, no matter what. The other thing is, sometimes I teach a class and feel like, oh man, I don't know. I think everybody's heard all of this already. And at the end of the class, somebody will come up to me and go, wow, I really appreciate X element from the class that really helps me get my head around something. And you have to realize that it's your audience that you're serving, not yourself. You are not your audience, and it's entirely possible that they have a need you're fulfilling that just doesn't speak to you, and that's fine. And in fact, if you can understand that and know who that audience is and get out of your head about it being for you, you will do work that's better suited to them in the long run anyway. So that's the thing, know your audience. And that was the top episode. So top episode of Takeup, number 1 was episode 12, Patches 2. Now, the thing I will talk about, there's a couple of honorable mentions for episodes that became popular very quickly. A recent episode we just did about directed practice and drills has absolutely taken off and has views that are getting it up toward the top 10 already. And the reason why I bring this up is to say this. The folks who are coming here and you folks here, I know that you are hard workers and people who are interested in bettering yourself. And the kind of people who are in the craft are people who are curious, creative people who are willing to put in the work and who are willing to try, sometimes fail, to learn, to create, and to get back up. And I think that's the thing. Perseverance. That was the other message we wanted to get on today. And I actually thought it was really impressive that this was something that came up as far as looking at these popular episodes. Directed practice, things that seem so unsexy, the idea of practicing, the idea of drills, of making fill samples, of making sample logos, of doing your own self-directed projects so that you can learn. It seems like such a drag to some folks. It seems like, how is that making money? How is that making art? The truth of the matter is that practice, that willingness to work on fundamentals, is often how we get the control of our tools so that we can do the things that we envision. And I think it's awesome to kind of know that perseverance, the willingness to keep on trying and to lean back into the beginner mindset, no matter how far along this journey you are to make things, is just awesome. That's something we need and something we should think of as important. So yeah. And Evelyn says there's still a way of communicating. Yeah, patches are great. And Aaron says love patches. Yeah, man, patches are part of it. And this is the thing. Whenever we talk about patches, sincerely, patches are emblematic of embroidery. I know, hilarious that I'm saying emblematic. I often do that, but they represent embroidery very well because they are so often used to show affiliation, to show who we belong to, the things that we do for ourselves, for our work. So it's clubs, it's sports, it's merit badges, it's the things we've achieved, it's the things we belong to, it's the places we work, it's the things we protect, it's the things that are important to us. Or it's funny patches. There's a lot of those. They're expression patches, ones that have phrases on them. They're jacket patches, they're motorcycle patches, the clubs that people belong to. They are patches on hats. They are the patches that you get from various national parks or wildlife areas that show you hiked there, the classic hiker badge. It's experiences you have. It's who you are. It's how you feel. It's what you believe in. It's who you belong to, which is how, as people who are in embroidery, we are helping people express where they belong, who they belong to, and what they believe. We help them wear their hearts on their sleeves. And if not literally, certainly figuratively, right? It's not the real heart, but it's certainly a portion of their heart. It's who they are. And patches are very much part of that. And I think that's such a big deal. And there's such a, and I agree with what Brian says. Brian says, as a Navy veteran, I've seen so much love for patches. It's huge business. Absolutely. It's awesome. So I would like to say, we're helping people communicate. We're helping them wear their hearts on their sleeves. We're helping them show where they belong, who they belong to, and what they believe in, and what they'll stand up for. So patches are huge, and embroidery is huge for that too. And I like to think that's part of the conversation we've had over this 100 episodes. I'm going to go ahead and stop for one thing real quick. I had a video that was sent in, and I say from my good friend Aaron Montgomery, and he gave me a congratulations video. I'd like to share that with you guys. So let's go ahead and start with that real quick, and then I'll get to the last little message about perseverance. And believe it or not, we have a links list and an article and everything, but just a short jaunt down that to end up with episode 100. But first, let's hear a little bit from Aaron.
Hey there, Reciprocators. My name is Aaron Montgomery with Our Success Group. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to my good friend Eric. Eric, congratulations on the 100th episode of the Takeup. That is so amazing. The perseverance, the amount of information, the breadth of information, the free stuff that you're giving everybody is so invaluable. So from the very bottom of my heart, and I will speak for the industry and the decorators community, thank you so much for all that you've done. Keep up the great work. We can't wait for the next 100 episodes. Awesome, Eric. Congratulations to you, buddy. High five. Talk to everybody soon.
So thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it, man. You've always been an awesome support. And honestly, if I've done something right, hopefully it's that I've provided some value that helps some folks, whether or not it's to do something creative, to make some money, to support themselves, to support their families, to express themselves. If I've helped with any of that, that's what I'm here for. And honestly, I'm touched when someone has said that. And honestly, I want to bring this up quickly. One of the things that happened during all of this is I won a second Reggie Award for being the best ambassador. And it's twice that I've won this. And even though this isn't the award that was from the most people, it wasn't from the largest trade organization. That's not what that's about. For me, the fact that there's an award that was voted on by decorators and for decorators that was given to me twice by people who I trust and believe in and who I've helped, hopefully, that says that I stand up for the industry and give a good showing for that industry, that means a lot to me. So thank you to everyone who voted for me, and thank you to everybody who is as part of this as well. So, all right, from that, folks, I'm going to briefly go into perseverance. We talked about that. First couple of things I have to say is that I do have a links list. I'm going to copy that and throw that in there for everybody here shortly. We do have a couple of things. I have an article that I think is interesting if you want to learn a little bit more about breaking down a big project. It's something we've talked about before. It's an older article, but I think it's still a useful article for us to talk about real quick. But yeah, the links list is there in the comments. We'll grab that for everybody who wants to click on that directly. So there you are. There's a links list for this week. It only has a couple things on it. It has an article called Jumping on Jacket Backs, Conquering the Fear of Digitizing Daunting Designs, because it's about breaking down big designs, and it's also somewhat about breaking down big elements that you're working on in general. It also has a book that I'm going to reference real quickly, which is The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. And The War of Art talks about the resistance we face as people who are doing creative work and what it means to show up and do the work. I don't agree with everything that's in The War of Art or everything that Stephen Pressfield has said, but there are nuggets from The War of Art that have absolutely followed me from reading that book that I think are worthwhile. And the last one there is in defense of sloppy embroidery, and it's a piece that I did for Embrilliance here that I really love, and it talks about our favorite work and the work that we do, and what it means to people versus what it means to us. And I think it's worthwhile. So we're going to talk about a couple of these things really quickly as we go. So let's close this up. We don't need to look at our top elements again, but what I will say is after that top 10, I think this all kind of fits together. But this is about perseverance. Go to that links list. You'll find a couple of those articles that'll be interesting for anybody who shows up. And this one, like I said, all about not being afraid of digitizing large and daunting designs, a piece from Printware that I did some time back, but a piece that I think is worthwhile. So we'll talk briefly about that, but here are a couple things that I think are interesting. Certainly, I'm going to let myself have a little bit of this discussion of cerebral stuff since this is my 100th. I'm having my victory lap. I'm going to say a couple of weird things and give you quotes and stuff. But here are a couple of things that I think are interesting from Stephen Pressfield. So The War of Art, like I said, it's a book about resistance. He frequently says that the job of creative people is to show up every day and do the work, to kind of clock in even when it doesn't feel like we're inspired. You don't wait for inspiration, you work and the inspiration comes. And I will fully agree with that. The more you break the seal and continue to do the work even when you don't feel inspired, it's not a muse who's going to come down and control you and make you create awesome work. It's showing up and starting the work that allows you to be receptive when the creative urge hits you, when the creative thing happens. And this is kind of the concept that, we have to open the door when opportunity knocks. The thing is, opportunity should find us working when it gets there. We have to be practicing our craft to make it really make the most of our opportunity. And these are a couple of quotes that I think are interesting from Stephen Pressfield, and also kind of about, life in general and how we feel about ourselves. Number one is this, and creative work being what it is. And he's talking about writing books and other things, but certainly creative work in general includes what we do. And this is one of the quotes from Pressfield. Creative work is not a selfish act or a bid for attention on the part of the actor. It is a gift to the world and every being in it. Don't cheat us of your contribution. Give us what you've got. And this is the attitude I try and take with myself. I don't always feel like my contribution is worthwhile. I definitely have days, multiple days, and more than you want to know, where I don't feel like the thing I'm going to give is what I would want to give for everybody or what's worthwhile to give. But I think about it that way. The creative work it's not a selfish act. It's something that we're trying to give to the world. And you just have to trust that it's something that might be useful. Luckily, my view of history, being as long as it is doing medieval work, I've looked at things that were graffiti scratched on a plank from a ship or scratched on a wall of a church 1,000+ years ago. And this kind of scritchy graffiti that doesn't seem to be all that interesting to someone artistically was fascinating to me. And I wanted to pour over the lines. And it came to me at that moment that I realized somebody's graffiti that they were scratching when they were thinking about going down to the tavern and grabbing something to drink on the way home, that graffiti is fascinating to me in 1,000 years, but it didn't mean anything to the person scratching it. We don't always know what's meaningful down the road. And so our creative input, we don't know who it's for all the time, but it's still worthwhile to get into the world because that's the human experience. And here's the other one that's hard to hear from me, from Stephen Pressfield, but I thought it was worthwhile to share with everybody. Our job in this lifetime is not to shape ourselves into some ideal we imagine we ought to be, but to find out who we already are and become it. That's a tough one for me. And I'll say, certainly, I've worked a lot on the concept of perfecting yourself. Now, I certainly am so far from it that I find flaw before I find good. At the same time, I'll say this. I understand now that the more of what made me interesting when I was younger, that made me weird, that didn't get me any good attention when I was younger, has become part of what people seek me for now. I started to understand that there are things that are unique about each of us that we probably may not like in ourselves, that are valuable, that are useful, that are helpful, and honestly, that contribute a unique perspective into the world. And for us not to, give what we've got is kind of a lack. It's kind of something we're lacking. It's kind of a loss to the world. In fact, it's not kind of, it is a loss to the world. If you don't create and don't try and don't give what you've got and leave something behind, it's a loss to the world. And we all are poorer for it if we don't have your contribution. And if you're wondering if I'm talking to you, I am. Every one of you. If we don't have your contribution to the world, to all of us, to culture, we are poorer for it. And it is a gift to all of us to have anything that you share. Yes, you. And hopefully, yes, me. And here's another thing that keeps me going. And this is it sounds a little dark, but hey, sometimes I have some quotes that sound a little dark. This is something from the Havamal. The Havamal comes from the Elder Edda. It's a Scandinavian text. So we're talking about an Icelandic text. This is a poetic text. So pre-Christian Scandinavia, medieval. This is something that is supposed to be spoken by Odin. Havamal means the words of the High One. So it's a very, very old poem. Let's put it that way. But in translation, it says this: "The foolish man thinks he will live forever if he keeps away from fighting. But old age won't grant him a truce, even if the spears do." And I know that sounds rough, but here's the thing I will be honest with you about is I'm an anxious speaker. I go out to speak and to teach, and I always feel like I've got to ramp myself up. I'm anxious. I'm nervous. I have that energy. Some people say, turn that into excitement. Feel that as excitement. But I'm worried. I am. When I first go out to teach, I'm usually worried that I'm bringing some content and I don't know how it's going to land, and I need to get it right. And I want to make sure that I'm giving enough value. And I get nervous about that stuff. But I think about this. I'm like, you know what? I'd rather be in the arena. I would rather go out and give what I've got than not. Because at the end of the day, I'll wonder if I could have done it. I'll wonder why I didn't try. And don't get me wrong, sometimes the best thing at the end of a class is the relief of not being in front of everybody for a minute. I do fine up there, and honestly, the good thing that happens up there is once I get in front of people and I know I'm giving my best and I see people engaging with it, the guy who does the presentation shows up and the nervous guy is gone. But I always think, I'm like, you know what? I could not do it and I could stay comfortable, or I could be uncomfortable. I could give it what I've got, and I could leave the best of what I have on the field and hope for the best. And if it reacts for someone, if it teaches someone, if they get something out of it, then I've done what I could do. And in the end, if I go out onto the field, if I go out into the ring and I get trampled, I'd rather be trampled on the ring, in the ring, and know that I came and I gave it my all, than to be on the outside waiting and hoping and watching and wondering if I had it in me. Doesn't mean that's easy. Absolutely not. Doesn't mean you don't get nervous. Absolutely not. Doesn't mean you always win. No, sometimes you get trampled. But that's how I keep myself going, even when I am worried about these things I'm giving. I say, you know what? I got out there. I participated. I'm in the ring. I gave it my best, and it's what I could do. Sometimes I'm not as prepared as I'd like to be. Sometimes I don't give my all the way I think I should. Sometimes I think I could have given more or done better, but I'm always glad at the end of the day to be the person who has done it and who has tried. And I think all of us have the opportunity to do that by far. And I think all of us have something to do it. I think all of us have something that we can give, and that the world is better for each of you having given what you had and showed what you could show to all of us. And I know I'm better for all the interactions I've had with you folks. So, like I said, that's something I wanted to share with you guys. Last couple things I'm going to go over from our little article. I just wanted to kind of go in for the last little bit of the breaking down embroidery designs, but it's also a little bit about breaking down things in the world, that breaking down our creative endeavors. So I'm going to go ahead and show that real fast, that jumping on jacket backs. If you go and look at that article, like I said, I know we've already talked a lot and I've gone through all this stuff that's heavy and interesting, and I've given you the emotional plea to share what you do, but it's also something that's basic to all of us and our basic work. When we're working on a big jacket back design or a large daunting embroidery design, what do? We analyze, we examine the design and the intended final product. We parse it, we break it into workable pieces in the sequence. We go through our execution. We work on the pieces as best we can. We replay and revise. We look at the work we've done, see how it's progressing. When we see something that's not right, when we see a gross error, we fix it as best we can and keep working. We stitch. We get out there. We actually execute and make it happen. And then we see how that worked. We evaluate it. But until we stitch, we cannot know how the file works. We cannot know how our work has actually come together until it's in the thread. And then we repeat. We do it again. And one of the reasons I bring this up, not just to show you, hey, this is how to break down a big design and get it going, But this is also how we deal with anything creative. We analyze. Now, we don't want to get paralyzed by it, but we analyze. We say, what is it that we're trying to do? Examine the area, examine the thing we're trying to do. What is it that we want to get? What's our final product? What's the result we want to achieve? We look for obstacles and opportunities, things that are stopping us from getting where we want to go, or things that we're worried will stop us, and opportunities, places where we can save ourselves time and effort, places where we know where we're going. We parse. We break the design into workable pieces. That's the same thing we do with any creative work we're doing. We go for the first step. You cannot walk the last mile. You cannot walk 100 miles at once. You can take a step. So we have to quit working on the last mile. We have to start working on the first mile, right? Execution. Sometimes you just have to get out and do it. That's what I said about speaking about everything else. We get out into the arena and we try. We run the design. We know we're going to ruin things. We know that failure is an opportunity and a possibility, but we also know we're going to learn from it. We digitize things out, and then we work. We experiment. We replay. We look at our file. We look at what we've done and we revise. We see where we're at. We take stock along the way. We stop to see where we've been and where we came from, and we make changes to see if we can get to that result we want. Stitching and evaluation, you do the thing. You get out, you do the thing, you look at it, and you revise. You say like this, you say, all right, Eric, it's been 100 episodes. Let's take a look at what we've done. We've put our work into the world. Now evaluate it. What should we do coming out from here? What should we do next? And you guys do the same thing. We do it at the end of our year. We do it at the end of each project, and we do it at the end of our designs. And then repetition. You want to make a career of something? You do it again. Do you want to do 100 episodes of a show? You do it again. You commit to showing up, and you say, all right, when it's time to do the next piece of work, when it's time to do the next thing on my list, even if I don't feel ready, even if I'm not sure it's the perfect way to do it, I'm going to show up and do the work. And when opportunity knocks, opportunity will find me working. It will find me in the arena. And the other one that I really love is from the Embroidery blog. And so I think it's nice to kind of end on this one. It's called In Defense of Sloppy Embroidery. And this is because I have often thought about the audience who is accepting my pieces, who is looking at my work. And I have different feelings about the work I've done than what they've done. And by the way of a story, I'll say this, your work will not be everyone's favorite. And when I'm looking at this image here, this is the quote unquote wall of fame that my operators kept. I'm sure that these designs are gone, and the designs that have gone after me are now up. Maybe a couple of them survived because they were still favorites. But these samples were all tacked up onto the wall behind the machines. Do I love this sample wall? No, I see a lot of flaws in it. But at the same time, I saw that it was important to them. And I also looked, this is a body of work, and it's only a fragment of all the pieces I've done. I shouldn't maybe take one of these patches and judge my entire career off of it. And I remember being in the dumps working on a piece that wasn't coming out for me. And I wasn't thinking about the body of work. I was thinking about the one little patch, the one little star that wouldn't stitch, the one letter that didn't look clean. But overall, there's a body of work that represents what you've really done. But here's some lessons that I've learned over time that I think is interesting. Number one, your work, your favorite piece will not be everyone's favorite, almost without fail. I like to do certain kinds of work. It's not always what people love. Now, sometimes your work will coincide with a tribe of people who love what you're doing, but it won't be everybody's favorite, and you can't expect it to be everybody's favorite. Also, the amount of labor you put in does not mean that the work will be someone's favorite because you put in the effort. One of the pieces that's the most famous out of my collection of samples I carry with me is this piece. It's a cover from Stitches magazine that I did years ago, where I interpreted this art on the left into this piece on the right. I did some color alterations, some other things to the art itself, but this digitized as a jacket back size piece that was executed for the cover of the magazine. And what you don't see here is this is the magazine cut of it. It also had the face of the other horses. It had a bunch of material that was never shown on the magazine because they cropped it down for size in a way that was not expected despite the measurements they gave me. So I had a bunch of work here that was never seen. The face of this horse, the other horses behind it, those are all in the actual embroidery and never made it to the magazine. So number one, how I look at the piece and how someone else looks at the piece may not even matter. All the work that I did here was never viewed by the primary audience, number one. Number two, when I look at this piece, this is the one that I always think is probably one of the most impressive because it's big and it took a long time and it was stressful for me to do. And The kind of impression of the pieces that were in the back, I learned a lot about just trusting that if we make the shapes that are in front of us for embroidery, we'll find that it represents the reflection in the photograph in real life, and that it makes some sense, even though it looks like mush when you're working on all these complicated pieces in this background. But the whole is there if we trust the process, right? That's the thing, though. I think this is impressive. This is the kind of work that's demanding and impressive, and I figure it'll be everybody's favorite. And this right here is my wife's favorite piece of mine. And I know I've told this story before, but it's one that I absolutely floors me every time. One of her very favorite pieces, if I ever ask of what embroidery she likes of mine, this is a botanical dogwood flower done in a single color. It's one piece of thread with no trims. It is very, very few stitches. And it's also a piece that one of my good friends in the industry, Carolyn Cagle, has used this very stock design in about 30 different ways, resized, 8 ways from Sunday, and constantly reuses this piece because she loved it so much, made tens of garments of it in different configurations. She loves this piece. This piece for me was an absolute throwaway. I did it as a stock design for a collection and I needed filler. But that's my wife's favorite piece comparative to the hard work that I've done that I thought was awesome. So number one, you're not your audience. Your favorite work will not be everybody's favorite, and that's okay and to be expected. The second thing here, you can make outstanding, well-made embroidery that is ugly. It can be ugly art. And this is one of the other favorite ones I like to show people. So I remember lovingly crafting out of individual satin stitches this entire Sloppy Joe sandwich. Somebody said they'd had a bowling team called the Sloppy Joes, and they said, I want an angry Sloppy Joe chasing a bowling pin. And I don't have the stitch out in front of me right now. I really need to make another one of these stitch outs and have it for everybody to see. But this is a lovingly crafted piece. I drew from a photograph this angry guy. He had some eyes that he liked that I was working from, but this is from a photograph of a Sloppy Joe, and I made this simplified version with this shaded bun, and it's not super complicated, but for what I was doing, very quickly kind of rendered out this Sloppy Joe sandwich. And as I realized, I kind of woke up from doing this fine carving of all these individual satin stitches to get texture and light. I'm like, I'm making a Sloppy Joe sandwich. So here is some of the ugliest, weirdest art that I've done that was immaculately made for embroidery. Just because we spend a lot of time in our interpretation doesn't make something beautiful. And sometimes we spend a lot of work on something that is ugly. However, did I think it was beautiful? No. Did it run well? Yes. Was it technically proficient? Absolutely. It did what it was intended to do. The beef had texture in it, and the customer loved this piece. It's still hilarious to me when I think of the time I spent in my life making an angry Sloppy Joe. You can make outstanding well-made embroidery even when the art is ugly. The embroidery is its own thing separate from the art. And the third one, people will love and cherish your work even when you can see its imperfections. And this is the funny one here. This particular piece over here, this little kind of mortar board on the globe, it is one of my very first pieces that I ever digitized. And little known to me, it was actually digitized for someone. It was for the graduation of the kid of someone who my boss knew. That's what I knew at the time. My boss knows somebody in New York who's apparently important. I got to do this thing from the boss's kid. Some high school in Paramus needs graduation hats. And I made this thing, and the stitch counts were the stitch lengths were too small. The counts were too high. The density was too high. It didn't look great. And it's like I said, one of my very first pieces, right? And I had to swallow my pride to even show you the digital preview on this thing. And it did not run great. And I had to work on it and beat it up. And so it was one of the very first things I did on a really floppy, kind of cheap, unstructured hat. Later on, I find out that this was done for the son of, I believe, a higher up at Nautica. So somebody who runs a clothing brand, and this higher up had these pieces done by my boss, and I didn't know he had connections with this guy. And so my first digitizing job that was just junky was done for someone who, absolutely knew better and knew what good embroidery looked like. And at the same time, I realized down the road that this piece that was on somebody's high school graduation hat, who's now, in their 30s, this person probably has these things in their cabinet, somewhere in their closet. It was the hat they wore to their graduation. Don't you remember when we all threw them at each other? Do you remember when we walked down the aisle? How it looked, what we did when we went to that party? Do you remember your friends from that period of time? When they picked this hat up, They're not looking at the length of my stitches. They're not looking at the roughness in the corner of that satin. They're not looking at that. They're looking at the piece for what it means to them. They are the audience and they make the judgment. We don't. Does it mean we shouldn't do excellent embroidery? No, it doesn't mean that. We should do excellent embroidery. We should do excellent work as much as we can. What it does mean is we don't always understand the entirety of the meaning behind a thing that we're making. And we may be making an heirloom. So should we take care of it? Yes. Does it mean that every out of place stitch makes this thing useless or terrible? No. And honestly, if we look at commercial work in the world, retail work in the world, there are flaws and scrapes and misplaced stitches all over it, even from the biggest, most storied companies, even from fashion companies. And our work will be judged by the meaning associated with it, by the people who wear it, by the people we give it to, sell it to, by how they use it, what it meant to them at the time they were wearing it or using it. That's where the meaning comes from, not just from our work. Should we still be excellent? Absolutely. Excellent craftsmanship is something that people will respect and love, and they will hold on to it more than a piece that looks like it was clumsily done or that we didn't try. But we should also understand that meaning is not derived entirely from the quality of what we do, but also from the quality of the piece itself, the experience someone has when using it, wearing it, seeing it, and the other things surrounding them in their life and what it means to them. We've all had a piece, even those of us who decorate. We've bought a t-shirt from a concert that was junk, but the concert was important to us. We've bought a hat or a patch from a place and the patch wasn't great, but we were somewhere that we wanted to commemorate. We should remember that meaning as part of this exchange as well, for sure. So that is what we have to do, is remember that stuff. We have to absolutely remember what that means to us and think that that meaning is more than just what we make and the kind of stitches that we have in the first place. It's not just the quality of a satin stitch, not just the length of a fill, not just the density. Maybe that the things we make and the small amounts of imperfection might not be such of a problem. But this is what we should do. We should show up. Show up to improve ourselves. Think about what we do, review what we do, but do it one step at a time. Do it as we can, to the best of our ability. And what you're going to find is that your willingness to consistently show up, to take it on, to be in the arena, to solve people's problems, to care about what they need, that is what they'll remember. The way you took care of them, the way you cared about the thing they wanted to express, the gift that you gave them and why, and honestly, the time that you spent in making that happen. That is what people remember. That consistent willingness to step forward and to do the thing. So I'm going to go ahead and say a couple more pieces. I'm going to talk to a couple more people and finish off with those comments. And then we'll be done here for today. And honestly, looking on to 100 more. But yeah, first, Beck says, I'm wanting to learn from the ground up. Very new to embroidery, not apparel decoration. Looking forward to the next 100 sessions. Learn all I can from you. Thank you very much. Yeah, glad to have you here. Lisa Shaw, compatriot of mine and somebody who does excellent education herself and has a lot of episodes in the can. Coming in very late. We'll catch a replay as usual. I know you give so much of yourself in your teaching. You know what? Means a lot coming from someone who gives so much of herself in her teaching and who gives so much of herself in her projects. Working with Lisa is wonderful. And if anyone is lucky enough to get to be in her classes, consider yourself among the very gifted. So thank you, Lisa, for that. And thank you for everything you do, for sure. And absolutely, Letty says, better to have tried. Better than never try at all. You don't grow until you get out of your comfort zone. Yeah, on the other side of fear is where all the good stuff is. When we feel that fear, and that's something that's from Pressfield's book also, when we feel that fear, it's a good indicator that we're getting close to where the growth is. You should feel like you're scraping up against something if you're growing. If you're growing, if you're about to shed that skin, you're about to get a little bigger in what you're doing. So definitely grow. And Jeff says, I struggle with the nerves going out too. Yes, sir. Me too. We both do. But what I'm going to say is you give of yourself greatly and you teach and you share your experiences and you deserve the accolades for doing so. You do great work, sir. So though you're struggling, no, number one, you don't struggle alone. Number two, you're doing great work. So the people who haven't seen the Embroidery Nerd stuff, go look at it, go be there. check out the Digitizing 911s, check out Jeff's classes, check out Justin's classes, realize there's stuff there. And Jeff, I wish we could have done the panel at Long Beach this year, but I'm glad we got to do it before, and hopefully we'll get to do that again sometime. So yeah, Jan says, you've helped me more than you know. I was about to kick my embroidery machine to the curb, then I found your YouTube. That is absolutely awesome. Thank you for saying so. Believe me, if you think I haven't wanted to kick embroidery curb once in a while, absolutely. I do other work sometimes in between and do other things. Why do I delve into the world of e-commerce and ads? Some days because it's not time for me to work on embroidery. Other days I really want to work on embroidery and not touch the ads. This week has been a long fight with the good people at Google. So yeah, I'll tell you that. There are times where we do different things, and it's okay to pursue different things in your life in different respects, because it also, like I said, it contributes to the whole of what you're capable of and what you know, the solutions you can provide, and also the solutions you may have in your mind, the different things that come together. But also it's good to sometimes get away from things, because if you're thinking about something else, the back of your mind can sit and grind and work on projects. And when we are doing something else but embroidery, or vice versa, we might end up grinding on that project in the back of our minds. We let that stew, and those combinations of all the different input, all the things we consume, can help us create. Like I say, consume broadly, create with focus, allow yourself to wander into other topics as well too. But yeah, thank you for saying so. I'm glad that I could help. And Mike says, love this point. This is also why I'm willing to do embroidery and special items. Someone is going to love it. And if they're willing to accept the low risk, I really want to do it. Yeah, I've done some heirloom stuff that scared the pants out of me, or pants off me, I guess. That scared me terribly. I've worked on heirloom quilts. Usually I will try and do an applied patch if they don't, but if they really want me to do it, I will. I've done handkerchiefs for embroidery. I've done lots of stuff for kids, for the birth of kids, and for things that will be kept, birth announcements, stuff like that. And I've done some things for people's end of life ceremonies as well. I think that what we do is, I mean, and maybe I think too much about embroidery, but I really do think we're helping people express themselves, and we're making these heirlooms and helping to mark the seasons and events of their life. And we should take it seriously, because I think about even the corporate stuff I've done. Who hasn't pulled out a uniform from an old job? Who hasn't pulled out a uniform from a grandparent's job when they've passed and thought about the life that they had at the time? We make those pieces. We're part of that. We're contributing to the history of these people and of ourselves. So it's the thing. It's worthwhile to know that what we do has value and contributes to life, to the way we live, to the way we mark those events in our life. In any case. And DJ Anderson says, great episode. Thank you, DJ. I mean, I hear nothing but good about your classes and going through them too. So thank you for what you do as well. Like I said, I think we all have to be part of this community. And when we share, and when we all make room for these experiences we have, and take from that we can build something greater, both in ourselves and apart from ourselves, we end up in something better. We end up in a bigger truth than we would have arrived at. And I think that's both in our own work, like the Takeup after 100 episodes is more than it was when it was a few episodes in each video. It's more than each video now, because of the relationships we all have, you guys who are watching it, and all the different things that I've explored that I might not have expected to explore over time. I'm a different embroiderer and a different creator than I was when I started. And I like to think that you guys who have watched are different since you've watched. And I think that the expressions that you've had and the things we've discussed in the comments have been enough to change things along the way. This is our life, and we might as well get into that discussion and that relationship, and to see all these different perspectives. And there's a place for all of us in it. And I would love to see more of what you have to share too. So like I said earlier, I'm going to bring that quote up one more time from Mr. Pressfield. Creative work is not a selfish act or a bit of attention on the part of the actor. It's a gift to the world and every being in it. Don't cheat us of your contribution. Give us what you've got. And I'll be here again next Friday, giving you all what I've got. And I can't wait to see you again for the next 100 episodes.